Hi, I'm Kelsey Zeiser. I'm a senior editor at Light Reading, and you're listening to the Light Reading podcast. And I am joined by.
Hi, this is Chris Stratmann. I'm the Associate Director for the FirstNet Response Operations Group.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining me.
Nice to be here today.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with AT&T and FirstNet.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been with AT&T about 6 years, and I came to the company from the United States Air Force and the Air National Guard, and I was the Chief Information Officer for the state of Kansas and the National Guard prior to coming to AT&T. And I'd worked on the FirstNet project prior to that, and so when I retired, I sought a position over here. I was originally in FirstNet sales, and then I was lucky enough to get to move over to an operational role in the FirstNet Response Operations Group. Been in the Response Operations Group for about 4 years, and I took the reins of the organization at the beginning of this year.
Yeah. And so how does your background, I believe, in the National Guard, how does that serve you well for FirstNet?
Very, very well, actually. So, just real quick, uniquely in Kansas, it's one of the states where the Adjutant General over the National Guard is also responsible for Homeland Security and emergency management. So, being the head of IT for that organization, I had a lot of experience with not just the military, but also with those two organizations and as well, including all our deployable assets, as well as our P25 trunk radio system, which served public safety nationwide and 911.
Mhm. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that radio system. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So most states have a trunked radio system. In other words, for
Mhm.
public safety, they have a radio system consisting of multiple towers across the state, and all those towers are connected together, right? Which ensures public safety can speak wherever they need to across the state.
Mhm. Yeah, very important.
Very,
And
yes.
would love to hear also a little bit for those who aren't as familiar about just the response operations group, what their role is within FirstNet, and I know it's also referred to as ROG.
ROG, yes. So the Response Operations Group was formed very near the beginning of when AT&T was awarded the contract for FirstNet, right? And the group is made up solely of former public safety and or military personnel. And the thinking was we wanted folks to be able to answer public safety's requests for support that walk the walk and talk the talk, right? And bring that experience to AT&T, as we were becoming a public safety company near the beginning of this project, right? And so we hired at the beginning a very small group. We're still relatively small, but a small group of folks. And as subscriptions in FirstNet grew across the country, we grew our group as well. Today, we're made up of 12 people, and 10 of us are assigned section chiefs by FEMA region across the country so that every FEMA region has a dedicated FirstNet Response Operations Group section chief.
Mhm. And so I know we're coming, I guess we're in the midst of hurricane season. Just curious, do you all have a busy season? Is it year round? I mean, I know I think of hurricanes just because they affect North Carolina pretty
Sure.
frequently. But of course, some areas it's tornadoes, wildfires. Is it pretty round the clock? Or do you have certain busy seasons for ROG?
It is. It's funny and appropriate that you would ask that. So typically, until the last couple of years, we did speak like that, like we have a busy season, right? And like you said, hurricane season tended to be the busiest season. Starting about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a really heavy wildfire season and it was pretty busy. But to your point, anymore, it's really pretty much around the clock. So it used to be we could say, oh, maybe during January, February, we can take a little bit of time to reset and get projects going maybe that we didn't have time for during those busier times. But even this year, as you well know, during the LA fires, for instance, we had a very busy January and February disaster wise. So, back to the question, it's really pretty much around the clock anymore, and that's fine. That indicates adoption and indicates that we're serving public safety year round, regardless of what disasters or events may be going on. So, yeah, it's pretty busy all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, and, that's, unfortunately, as you said, things do seem to be ramping up, and, the wildfires seem to be getting even worse, and, hurricane season just always makes me nervous here in North
I
Carolina.
I understand.
Yeah. So prepping for a natural disaster, tell us a little bit about how that works. How do you assess what mobile assets might be needed? And maybe actually, before we even go into that, if you could talk a little bit about uh, what types of mobile assets are available from FirstNet to ensure connectivity for public agencies and also residents and businesses during a natural disaster.
Sure, sure. So let me start off with that on how we respond, if you will, to a request from public safety. Right? They can make that request anytime they want, 24. So we're available 24/7, 365. And what we ask is that they let us know what capability it is that they're looking to satisfy. Right? What's the situation on the ground? How many people, users, are they going to have there? And then we conduct what we call a triage call. Right? And within about 10 minutes of that request coming in, we conduct that call. We bring multiple subject matter experts, and then we determine what the best asset is to your question regarding the asset. Right. So satellite colts, which use satellite backhaul to then broadcast an LTE or 5G signal. That's kind of the piece of equipment that gets the most attention. Right. Big truck rolls out there, dish goes up, antenna goes up, and then we're providing connectivity where public safety needs it. But that triage call, we look at, again, the very specific circumstances for which public safety needs, and we have a whole toolbox of potential resources or equipment that we can deploy. We have about 3 or 4 different form factors of those satellite colts that I talked about. We have multiple smaller pieces of equipment like repeaters and small cells, phone caches, things like that we can bring to bear on a particular need, or we can ever even do network optimization if required. Right? So we can look at the network and see what additional settings we may be able to employ to make sure that the customer is having the absolute best experience, again, for that particular need.
Mhm. And you mentioned, the Sat Colts get a lot of attention. Is there more of a movement toward smaller form factor mobile assets that might be a little bit easier to deploy, especially I imagine in wildfires or like forested areas? You might need something smaller, even a bicycle that's
Right. No,
equipped with,
absolutely.
yeah.
Right. No, that's a great question, and absolutely. So, like a lot of information technology areas, things get smaller. Right? The technology gets better. We're able to make things, put things into smaller packages, and so we're going the same way. Right? So again, yes, our kind of our bread and butter, and the thing that gets the most attention is the satellite colt. But interestingly, so one provision of the contract that we have with the FirstNet Authority was that we had to be able to provide customers with the ability to deploy their own Band 14 network, their own FirstNet Band 14 network, right? And so a lot of customers, and even back when I was working on this from the state of Kansas side, were asking, "Hey, can we own our own SATCOL?" Right? Well, as you can imagine, that's a fairly expensive piece of equipment, right?
Hmm.
And so what we did was we developed with a partner company. We developed a small form factor. It's about the size of a charcoal grill, right? In it's a box about that size, and it's called a compact rapid deployable, or CRD. And it gives the customer the ability to broadcast their own LTE signal in a very small package. They can go put it on the back of a truck, in a trailer if they want, and deliver it wherever they want on their own whenever they need to. So shortly after that piece of equipment was introduced, we then introduced a mini CRD, which is an even smaller form factor and does the same thing. The performance, the footprint that it covers is not quite as large as a CRD, but it's much more portable and hence gives the customer a lot more flexibility. And we employ these devices, are both the CRD and the mini CRD. The Response Operation Group uses as well. And then aside from that, then I also mentioned previously like a mobile broadband kit that we use, and then the cellular repeaters and small cells, which are even smaller, right?
Mhm.
Lastly, even going back to the SAT Colts, even our next generation of SAT Colts are going to be smaller than what we're using today. We've already launched some trailerized versions that are again more flexible and a much smaller footprint. So we're excited to get those in the inventory as well.
Mhm. And then, so once a natural disaster is, you can kind of track a hurricane coming. Once you know that that's on its way, what is the process for um, de- assessing which mobile assets might need to be deployed and working with those public agencies ahead of and during a natural disaster?
Right, right. So very important part of our business, right? And so when we get notification of a storm coming, and one thing I want to note is AT&T has the AT&T Weather Operations Center. To my knowledge, we're the only major carrier that has a dedicated staff of meteorologists that give us all that weather information for days prior. So all the information that you're getting from local news or the Hurricane Center or things like that, we're getting tailored specifically to AT&T, right? They're letting us know, they are giving us the weather and the consequences for our entire infrastructure, right? What it looks like for central offices and tower locations and all those different locations, right? Again, tailored specific to our needs. So we're getting a lot of intel early before the storm of where we need to shore up to make sure that we're going to weather the storm in the best way possible, right? So in addition to that, we are looking at staging locations, right? So along with our network disaster recovery team, they are really our kind of our heavy hitters, right? They bring in all the large pieces of equipment, multiple personnel, and we're self sufficient in that regard as well. They bring in bunkhouses and a kitchen and all that stuff. So when we forward deploy for a large event like a hurricane, we're not taxing local resources that are meant for public safety or the public at large, right? So we're looking for those staging locations. We're pre-deploying equipment to where it's safe, right? We don't want to go too far in because we don't want to subject our folks and our equipment to harm and damage prior to the storm coming, but we'll get as close as we possibly can, right? All before the storm comes in. So that's kind of it equipment wise. Directly with public safety, we really leverage all of our FirstNet client solutions executives in the field, and we make sure that they're talking to all their clients, right? Talking to all the public safety entities and making sure, hey, where are your critical areas of concern? Where do you think you may locate staging areas? Where do you typically see maybe flooding events or damage or utility outages that post storm, so that we can ID those beforehand. And once we have landfall and that storm is passed and it's safe to go in, we've already got a whole list of things that we need to concentrate on before anybody starts asking even.
Mhm. And then afterwards, do you, how do you assess what needs to remain as permanent mobile uh, as the network is being restored?
Sure.
How do you assess what temporary assets to leave there for a while as that process unfolds?
Right, right. Well, you make a great point. Rather, although indirectly, the customer has the absolute best experience on the macro, what we call the macro network, right?
Mhm.
The existing towers, and that always provides the best experience. So our number one goal, and again, working with local mobility ops teams and network disaster recovery, our number one goal is to restore that network, right? So whether it be a power outage or maybe the transport is damaged, the fiber, microwave, whatever, that's our number one goal. So we want to mitigate really the question that you asked, right? Having to leave temporary deployable assets on scene, and we're really good at that, and we're very successful in restoring the network. So, but to your question, we really have to. We want to look at the timeline, right? And what so if site X has not recovered yet or restored yet, what's that timeline look like, right? So are we going to end up leaving a deployable asset there another 2 weeks, or are we looking at 5 months or something like that, right? And again, depending on that timeline, we may be able to bring in something in between, right? All our markets have cows, for instance, which are have a capability somewhere in between a sat colt and a macro site. So maybe we could bring in a cow and provide the bulk of the connectivity we need to. So that timeline is the first thing we look at. And then from our perspective, specifically from FirstNet's perspective, what's the public safety footprint look like around that site that's out of service, right? How many users are around that site? What's the throughput? What are restoration activities in general look like, right? Is there going to be a lot of activity around that site for some time to come? And so all those things come into play. But we don't. The bottom line is we don't remove an asset while there's still public safety activity somewhere, right? So if they still need that connectivity there, we're going to leave the asset there.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine for residents having access to things like just being able to charge their phones and make calls. Are there facilities available from FirstNet for that, so that they can, uh, ensure that they can talk to family and friends and provide updates?
There are.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
So we rely on our external and legislative affairs and our local salespeople and retail to help us with all of that. Right? It's a multi-pronged approach where we assess what the general public needs
Hmm.
on scene, and then see what pool of resources we can pull that from. So the whole team is on board in providing that general connectivity, like you mentioned, to the public. We also have a relationship with ITDRC, which is an Information Technology Disaster Resource Recovery folks, and AT&T is a major sponsor of theirs, and they come in with their mobile connectivity center and provide that same kind of connectivity to the public post disaster.
Hmm. And then after things are kind of settling down, do you debrief with the public agencies? How do you assess how everything went, and how you might want to approach a similar natural disaster or emergency event in the future?
We do, and we rely a lot again on our client solutions executives to own that relationship and have those discussions with them, and to bring the response operations group in whenever necessary to hammer out the details and see, like you said, how can we improve our response for the next time as well. I think this is a good time probably to also mention our accountability to the FirstNet Authority, right? So this we are under contract, right? We're under federal contract to provide this service to public safety, and they have an entire part of their organization which does exactly what you're talking about, and they do stakeholder outreach, right? And they make sure post disaster, post response that we delivered on the contract. They'll go work with public safety, with the states, emergency operations center, emergency management, and they'll query them and they'll say, "Hey, did FirstNet provide what you needed during this disaster?" And again, that's unique in the industry. We're the only ones that are accountable to the federal government for our response.
Hmm. And then just as we wrap up, looking forward, Uh, what are some things that you're particularly excited about in terms of what's next for mobile assets? Things that you might be working on. We talked a little bit about um, uh, making everything kind of shrinking down to a smaller
Right.
form factor, but also are there new 5G assets on the horizon, more use of drones? What are you looking forward to in terms of deployables and even how you adjust your relationships with some of these safety agencies?
Yeah, yeah. So absolutely. Again, technology is just increasing leaps and bounds, right? And there's a lot of stuff in media regarding, what can be leveraged for public safety and what we can do to improve our response on a daily basis. Absolutely, 5G is kind of at the top of that list, right? And again, we're contractually bound to upgrade our assets to 5G, and we're in the process of that right now. And really looking forward to what we can be able to provide to public safety in an environment where we have reserved bandwidth for them, and we have the performance capabilities of 5G, right? So we're going to be on the leading edge of that here coming up, and just being able to provide public safety with a great experience. Satellite's another piece that I'm looking forward to. We're currently upgrading our fleet to low Earth orbit capabilities from geosynchronous satellites, and the low Earth orbit capabilities provide a lot of advantages over geosynchronous, and so we're looking forward to that as well. And we are on a very accelerated course here at the beginning of this year to be able to provide more LEO type assets to public safety. So looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, and just briefly, what are some of those advantages that you're looking forward to with Leo versus Geo?
Right. So mainly latency and bandwidth, right?
Hmm.
So there's the LEO satellites are much closer to the Earth, right? So that latency that signal takes to travel to the satellite and back is much less. And lower latency allows the usage of a lot more applications that can't tolerate the increased latency, especially things like push to talk. Right, push to talk
Hmm.
is very important in this environment. It's one of our primary offerings on FirstNet, and the low latency that Leo provides a much better experience for push to talk. And there's other, again, the bandwidth, which varies in general. Low Earth orbit provides more bandwidth, and that also allows the use of more applications that public safety needs, such as maybe mapping applications, some video applications, things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, the Leo space definitely seems to be exploding, so to speak,
Yes. Yep. Yep.
and a lot more opportunity there for better coverage. So that's interesting to hear that that's an important focus and makes sense. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been really interesting, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to tell the FirstNet and the Response Operations Group story. And we're just, again, we're a team of all former public safety and military, and we're just proud of what we can provide to these folks that are out there on the line every day. So thank you so much for having me.